Well, you know,
And could there be any chance that you could have wrestled, but couldn't have wrestled 100% and didn't want to do it?
I suffered a bad back. I hurt my lower back after the match. My last match with Steve in Roanoke, Virginia, and ended up going through 10 weeks of therapy at the Charlotte Spine Center, you know, and went to 3 doctors, went to Duke University, took MRIs, took CAT scans and all, and they just basically told me, you know, after almost 20 years of wrestling and 6,000 matches, that the back is just gone. And they said, Ricky, you'll probably get in the ring and still wrestle, but you know, it's going to take that one bump, whether it be off the top or whatever, that we're going to cut you open and put these 2 big screws in your back, take some stuff out and screw it all back together, and then the rest of your life's going to change.
And was it also that maybe if you couldn't give 100% of Ricky Steamboat, what people expect of Ricky Steamboat, you're not going to do it?
Well, you see that so much in today's sports, whether it be tennis or basketball. Unlike Michael Jordan, he's one of a kind. But you know, in football or baseball or even in wrestling, you see some guys that were able to do what they could do when they're in their prime in their career, yet they're continuing to wrestle, and I look at them and I sit back that, yeah, maybe the guy should have got out when he was on top. You know, the guy could really work. Yes, that was a thought, because let me see, I was 41 when I hurt my back. 41, 42 years old, and I noticed that my legs were not quite like what they used to be. I was real big on keeping in shape, you know. I'd run stairs in a hotel, you know, all the time. And just keep in shape. But it didn't matter how much I would put into keeping in shape, that I noticed that sometimes in the course of a match, my legs were gone. It's just like a boxer, you know. In the later rounds, the first thing to go is his legs, you know. But I would have kept going. I was in decent enough shape even at that age to keep going, to where I could keep up with the youngsters at that time, you know. And I actually had a hope and a prayer that I wanted to continue wrestling until I was 45. It would have put me about another 3 more years in the business, but it just didn't happen.
Okay, one question. Maybe this is a question that hasn't been asked. I'm going to try one here, all right? 20 years of wrestling. Always a fan favorite. Maybe you and Tito Santana are about the only 2 that never did a heel turn. Was it ever suggested to you to try a heel turn, or you just said, I'm not doing it, this is the way I am, or what?
Well, you know, I made the suggestion to Pat Patterson.
Get out of here. Exclusive. He wanted to go heel, wanted to join the dark side, but guys like the short thing.
Yeah, really, I did. You know, I think at that time I was, excuse me, probably wrestling about 17 years in the business, 18 years in the business. I went to Pat Patterson, you know, with WWF, and I said, you know, I've never, ever worked as a heel. Never, ever. And I would like to. And then Patterson looked at me and he said, you know something, Steamboat? The fans just wouldn't believe it.
They believe Backlund, though.
No, he got booed for the wrong reasons.
We'll leave that alone.
Yeah. They just wouldn't believe it. And he said, I don't care. We could send you out there with a chainsaw and cut somebody's head off, and the fans still just would not believe that you turned as a bad guy. And
I just can't believe that it was actually your suggestion. That's pretty much an exclusive here. Good. I got one.
Well, you know, I think it
would have made a lot of sense too. You could have turned on the new guys coming in. I mean, the Hogan. That would have made a lot of sense.
It was a point in time in my career that
grow that mustache, you know, do that.
the Fu Manchu.
There you go. Yeah, you and Hogan. I would have paid $1 to see that.
You know, but it's just a point in time in my career. I think I was getting a little stale, and I just want a little change of pace. You know, after being babyface for so long and good guy and waving to the fans and smiling, that I just wondered what it felt like to get up there in the ring and tell that so-and-so to shut up and sit down.
It's great. I love it. It's great. You know how great that is? I can't believe I have experienced something in wrestling that Ricky Steamboat hasn't. Ha-ha.
Well, you know, John, I was always on the other side of the ring watching the heels do it, and I many times during the match I'd sit there and say, God, I wonder what that feels like to be able to tell so-and-so to
But you know what the funny thing about it? The guy you tell shut up is the first guy to come over to you and ask you for an autograph when the night's over.
Well, that's the way the business has changed. That's the way the business has changed. You know, you got more of the heels getting hurrayed than the baby faces. You know.
Now, when you broke into wrestling, if I could go off on something here for a second here, I'm just thinking of it off the top of my head. The promotion was a little bit different. TV was used to promote house shows, and that's basically what it was. You did your TV to promote what was coming up at the Omni in Atlanta, what was coming up in Madison Square Garden, and that evolved to pay-per-view, and now evolved to WCW being basically absorbed by WWF. What do you feel about today's wrestling? Are you kind of a little sad, upset the way it's gone, or did you think it just evolved that way?
Well, I understand one thing. You know, Vince McMahon has looked at it, even though there's a lot of pros and cons about Vince McMahon, as the way he's promoted the business, and Vince McMahon just being himself. But he has taken the business to another level, and I sit back and look and understand that this is something that he's had to do, and you can't dispute the numbers that they're doing. You know, the number of people that come to their shows, their pay-per-view buyer rate. You can't dispute any of that kind of numbers. But also with it, you know, the art form of the business, the way two guys can go out there and wrestle and tell a story has sort of been lost. You know, there's a lot of bumping and stuff going around. And then there's been some other smaller groups, you know, that started some of this, what do you call this, overkill wrestling, this really rough stuff, you know. But
one last question. I promise to be the last one. We talked about this briefly when he was setting up the camera here about what you miss about wrestling not being around. Is doing seminars such as like what you're doing today, keeping your hand involved, is that enough to feed the need that you have for pro wrestling, or did you actually maybe want to get more involved some way, maybe your own federation, your own gym?
God, you know, I feel this for now. This fills a need for Rick Steamboat. You know. Handing down to the guys and showing them stuff that I know, and hopefully it'll help them in the future. You know, when the WWF comes into town, they do TV. Maybe they'll get a chance to do a dark match, and they'll take a look at him and say, hey, this he's pretty good, you know. So, you know, maybe 1 out of 50 or 1 out of 100 will get a shot at working with the big time. But in reality, I'm working so close right now with my son, and he's gotten involved with racing that that adrenaline is getting met that way. I get that pump and that adrenaline every time at the start of the race when he's driving. And you know, people ask, well, how many races you guys do a year? Well, we've been averaging, you know, 40 or more races a year. You know, that's every weekend almost. You know, so. That's keeping me occupied in that, and plus the fact that just being able to be with my son and doing something. He wants to be the big-time Winston Cup driver, and you know, and he's a pretty darn good amateur wrestler right now. But I know everybody asks me, is he going to be another Steamboat Jr. out there? And I said, well, I really don't think so. His heart's in racing, and I don't push him into wrestling. I don't push him in racing, but he'll race every single weekend if he could.
Wasn't there a story about a tournament where Flair's son was at it and your son was at a tournament, something similar? I heard something about that.
Yeah. Yeah, Flair's son, this was several years ago.
I'm sorry, I hadn't talked to you since then.
Yeah, this is several years ago. Flair would show up at the wrestling tournaments, and I would show up at you know, of course, we got our sons there, and everybody says, oh, my goodness, there's Ric Flair. Oh, there's Rick Steamboat. Oh, there's their sons, and they're wrestling. So that people starting to, after a year of it, were wondering, God, I wonder what happened if Flair's son would wrestle against Steamboat's son. What would happen? They never wrestled against each other because Flair's son was in a different weight class than my son, you know, the amateur school-type wrestling. But they had, at one particular match, tournament, we did a little grudge match. And it had nothing to do with the tournament, but the fans just wanted to see it happen. So we put Flair's son out there against my son. And Flair's son was about, 2 or 3 weight classes above my son in weight. And Richie went out there and pinned him in 15 seconds, my son. Flair was in his corner, you know, his son's corner, and I'm in my corner. And my son went out there and pinned his son in 15 seconds, and then they said, let's try that again. So we said, all right, we'll start another match.
How many people were there?
Oh, well, you know, this is at a high school, okay. You know, so, you know, 250 people were there. So they said...
another match?
Yeah, let's do another one, you know. And so I said, all right. So the referee got out there and got the 2 boys together, and they started the match, you know, standing up, amateur wrestling. And in about 30 seconds, my son pinned Flair's son again. So I looked across the mat and I said, you had enough, Dad? You know, and that was the... That was that, and that was the only time they ever wrestled against each other. It just, but his son is, Flair's son's a darn good little wrestler now. Yeah, he's taken some private lessons from a kid named T.J. Jaworski, who's like a national champion in college and this and that. And Flair's son's a good wrestler.
Okay, Ricky, I just want to wrap this up by saying thank you very much for taking some time with JCW Television, JCW Wrestling. We hope to see you up again around this time soon. Thank you, Ricky.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I'll be happy to chat a little bit with you, and just don't stay away so long next time.
This is John the Sure Thing Shane with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.